Welcome to the Sister Girls Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Sharee, and we're back with another episode. All right, Sister Girls, we are in the fourth quarter. We almost there of the year. And if there's any time to begin your self-healing journey, it's now. And while I can give you a good affirmation, you will need more than that on your journey. So I've called in some backup. Nakeia Homer is a well-being educator, author, and the founder of Heal and Grow Daily, a well-being community and private membership. I mean, she be grown, y'all. She's a sought-after well expert and trauma-informed educator, facilitating powerful workshops and keynotes on the power of story, self-love, self-care, and purpose. Her healing inequality through allyship, and course at the David Epping School of Business, University at Utah. Nakeia has released a new book, Habits for Healing. I got it. Reclaim Your Purpose, Peace, and Power. Welcome, Nakeia. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for inviting me in. I'm excited to chat with you.
I'm excited to have you. So I always open up the conversation by asking on what for your favorite song this season on a scale of 1 to 10, where you at? 10 being your favorite song and one being, at the bottom. How are you feeling?
Oh, that's a good one. I am right. I'm gonna just go by right now, which I always try to do. I'm at a 10. I'm at a 10 today. I'm good.
That's a great place to be. That's
Mhm.
what's the song? What's the song though?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me think. When you said that at first, I was like, oh my God, I gotta pick. I'm gonna go with what I was listening to today. It's two songs. Gone by Alex L. and I forget his name, Dine, his first name. And then I'm also listening to Colors by them. And the reason I love these two songs and they've been on
Mhm,
replay is because of the chord progression. It's very
mhm.
melodic, very abstract, but also just very soothing. So that's what I've been
Okay.
listening to for like the past 2 days, those 2 songs on repeat.
I like that. You gave a complete answer. Usually people are like, okay, it was this song and that's it.
Yeah.
You thought about it. So, okay. So before we jump in, how does one become a well-being educator? Because we hear about like mental health educators and like all type like self-help coaches, but like a
Mm,
well educator. How do you define that? And how did you get there?
mm. So I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a fan of titles because I am multi-passionate, multifaceted. I've had so many different things that I've done in the world. And so I don't like titles. But of course, when you're in business, especially online, you have to choose an industry and kind of choose a title that people will know you by. So I went with it. For me, well-being educator is someone, or I'll just say what I do as a well-being educator, because I know there are many, is I try to give as much information as I know and I learn as I go on what we can do to support our well-being. There is mental health, there is physical health, and then there is emotional health. There are three aspects of our whole being, and those are three. And since I share on all of them, I decided to go with well-being. If I think if I was just talking about the body or working out, then I might have chosen wellness or something like that. But that's why I choose well-being.
I like that because I feel like a lot of people do try to like stick you in a box, especially when you in like the well-being wellness industry. They like, okay, you're over
Mhm.
here, so they don't
Right,
want you to move.
right.
Okay, so while reading your book, I found it relatable and it tackled things that show up in daily life. So, how long did it take you to narrow down what you wanted to talk about and the personal stories that you wanted to share and use as a guide?
So, when I knew I was writing a book on habits for healing, I knew there were many. And what I did is I actually kind of workshopped with someone who's been a part of my community for years now, probably since 2014. And I asked her, what is it that you get the most value from when I share? What habits have I shared with you and the group and the community that you feel have been the most impactful? And so once she shared the ones that she appreciated the most, I took a look at those and then I looked at some of the questions people have asked me. And I answered the question I asked myself a question that I answered, which is if someone was beginning their healing journey or frustrated by their healing journey, what habits would I invite them to engage in? And I came up with the 9 that I included in the book.
Okay, I like that. And then what made you include personal stories? Because you have your stories mixed with like client stories to kind of bring it all together and make it relatable. So it didn't feel like a doctor or like, the teacher was coming after me. It felt like a conversation and you were just using like people that you knew to help with us, to help kind of guide us.
My story is the foundation of my brand, where I come from, the circumstances that created a need for healing. So it's easy for me to talk about myself as an example of what it is that I'm teaching. But then I also know that I haven't gone through everything in life. And so inviting my clients in was important to me. What I wanted to do was to help people feel seen as much as possible. And that is the power of story. When I tell you a story about my childhood, inevitably it elicits or inspires you to think about yours. It also does something else that was a trick that I use, right? It invites you to hold space for me or to
Mhm.
show me some empathy, some compassion. Once empathy is in the room and compassion is in the room, then I can direct you to do that for yourself. A lot of times we are so much more empathetic for others and their
Mhm.
story than we are for our own. So there was absolutely a strategy to using the stories. And based on the feedback that I received so far, it's worked.
Yeah, it has because it definitely made it feel like a flow. Like it just invited us into the space, well, me as a reader, and it didn't
Mhm,
feel so like do these bulletin points and then you'll be okay. It was like here
mhm,
I'm going through the same thing or something similar, and then let me explain. Let's like work this out.
mhm. I want to say one more thing to that point. I wrote two other books.
Mhm.
This helps and all the right pieces. Those books are poetry and prose. And
Mhm.
so I didn't want to just throw a self-help book at my audience, knowing
Mhm.
that they were used to reading one-liners or short essays or prose.
Mhm.
And so the story kind of bridges, in my opinion, the whole self-help aspect of this third book
Mhm.
and talking to you, conversational, poetic, and really meaningful conversations that I had in the other two books.
I love that, and I'm happy that you did do that because I think people would have kind of been a little bit like, "Wait, hold up, we just jumped." So it's gonna ease people in. So one of the things that you did cover is like the art of letting go, and that was a topic for me that I feel like social media everywhere we're always talking about it, and why it's so hard for people to let go. So why do you think that when it's something that we love or like, it becomes that much harder to let it go, even when we know it's not good for us? And then how can we kind of change the narrative of just staying in a bad situation because it makes us feel good, or the person makes us feel good, or the thing makes us feel good, or the job?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right in that we talk about letting go a lot. And what's been really interesting is from the feedback from the book, that chapter really stands out. In fact, I think it was like last week or the week before, someone said, you should do a TED talk on this, right? On letting go. What I recognize in myself and in others, that is not just about whether you like it or not, because there are things that I know as a former um, domestic violence shelter program director, even when those things like abuse or neglect, if you're a child or something that isn't necessarily good to you, is present, there's still a difficulty. You tussle with the idea of letting go. So, what I realized is that it doesn't just have to be good for you or to you. What it does have to be is something that is attached to some grand idea, fantasy, or hope for the future. We are stuck in the past often, and so yeah, it's hard to let go, right? But again, we know and have experienced that thing as good in some way, and so that's why it's difficult to move on. But when it comes to the relationships that we had hope that we will one day have beautiful children and a white picket fence and have this title
Mhm.
and in this community, or the job that we thought would get us out of the hood or get us out of our financial situation or give us something that we can brag about over Thanksgiving dinner so that we're not always competing with our siblings who look like they're having it all together. It's that hope that the thing will create a reality around what we fantasize. And so we're not just letting go of a person. We're not
Mhm.
just letting go of a relationship. We're not just letting go of a business or a business idea. we're letting go of what that meant to us, what that can bring to us in the future, and how it can add to our story.
I like that. And I think once people can let something go and just like freely release it, it gives you room to accept new things. Like,
Yeah.
cause you can't get nothing else if you're holding on so tight to what was instead of just kind of like looking forward and opening your arms to what can be. So
Mhm.
I love that. The one of the next things that you talked about was self-care. And self-care to me is so interesting because it's like a buzzword. Now it's like a buzzword and it's also an aesthetic. Like people have designed products, clothing, everything around self-care.
Mhm.
Um, and it's become more of like an aesthetic versus an actual practice. Because what I found is self-care looks different for everybody. So it's like we find ourselves performing the act and not actually getting any benefits from it, and
Yeah.
then we're like back in the rut and we really don't know why. So how do you think we can recreate what self-care habits look like for us individually,
Mhm.
so that we can kind of move that personal needle, so it won't feel like, oh, I have to get into yoga and then go to the spa and then get my nails done, and then it's like and then at the end of the day I still feel empty because it's not tailored
Mhm.
to me.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, there's a theme with every habit. I talk about things that are trending, things that we already want to do, things that have a hashtag assigned to it. And then I give a different perspective. Self care has to support your well being, it has to be something that actually makes you being you easier. Or you being you, something that you could do with more ease. And so, if you're getting your nails done, but you still struggle with your relationships, when you get back home to where the relationship is a struggle or the relationship is toxic, that's why you don't feel like you've recovered, because you're right back where your need was not met or right back where there was a deficit. And so my approach to self-care is to fulfill a need. My approach to self-care is to fill in a void or to support or contribute to a deficit. And so a lot of people were coming back to me and they're like, I'm doing self-care. I'm doing everything everybody's talking about. I'm going to yoga. I'm eating better. I'm doing all the things. But I'm like, did you address your core needs? Did you address the complaint that you use to stop you from being who you're called to be? Or are you just doing what's trending? Or do you just want to take a picture? Or do you just want to say that you went to the spa, that you got your hair done and your nails done? We have to really start addressing our needs.
I like that because I think again it's very performative and we feel like we're not getting enough out of it. But it's
Mhm.
like once you realize, okay, the mother of three is her self-care might look like just 15 minutes sitting in silence. Someone
Right.
else's self-care really might be like taking swimming lessons. It could be
Mhm.
so different and it doesn't have to look the same. And I think we're starting to get there, but
Yeah.
it's gonna be a
Hopefully the
little.
book will help. You're right about that. So I have a need to be alone, but I have a
Mhm.
family. So I use my drives in the car. That's why I was talking about the music, right?
Yeah.
Because I was ready to answer because that's a part of my self-care. I
Mhm.
love how music, for one, it's soothing to our nervous system because it helps to elicit feel-good hormones. So does my drive alone, but also so does working with certain clients. I have a need to feel seen. If I have a
Mhm.
client who I can't relate to or they're not getting me, and when I say feel seen, I don't mean like exposure and looking at me. I mean, my point of view is resonating and aligning with you. You are called to the work that I do, that type of seen. If that doesn't happen, then I don't feel good in my work. So self care for me is to only take on certain clients. So when we look at self care like that, then we are supported.
Mhm. That makes so much sense. The next buzzword that you tackled, which I was like, "Uh-oh, we stepping into deep waters." Accountability. I
Yeah.
feel like accountability is a word that has been overused and underperformed. I
Mm.
think it's safe to say that most people don't want to say something is their fault because
Mhm.
being the victim is so much easier. Um,
Mm.
it doesn't really require much work.
Mhm.
You can create like an illusion of comfort, because it validates us. Like nobody wants to be the villain. So now, in a world where most of us don't want to be the villain, how do you
Mhm.
think we can like shift our thinking to break that habit so we can move forward? Because it's such a easy, I would say probably it might be one of the easiest habits to fall back into of all the habits that you
Mhm.
address in the book.
Yeah. We love accountability when it comes to other people.
Yeah.
So I love to tell somebody they need to be accountable to what they say, what they do when it comes to me. But what we didn't see is the beauty of accountability when it comes to ourselves. So when I see accountability or an opportunity to be accountable, which is to decide to take on the obligation of fixing something, correcting something, changing something, etc. Because responsibility is another word, and often we use it interchangeably. But right, responsibility is blame or fault. Who did it? Who said it? Whatever. Accountability is who's going to do what needs to happen next.
Yeah.
So when I look at my life and I see opportunities for accountability, I see opportunities for more control over the outcome I want. So when I explain accountability as control, when I explain accountability as self correction, when I explain accountability as getting the outcome that you desire more often, then people see it differently. And that's the conversation that we have in a book. Whenever something goes wrong, I'm like, did I do it? And when I
Mhm.
did it, I'm happy because I can't control my partner. I can't control my kids. I can't control my neighbor. I can't
Mhm.
control my clients. There's so many things we cannot control. The only thing we can
Mhm.
control is ourselves. And so, personal responsibility or accountability, depending on where you are in your life, is personal power. And that's how I address it in the book. And that is a habit that if you adapt the habit of saying, okay, what next? Because it's like the one way I like to say it is, I'll take it from here. Even when someone else is responsible for what has happened to me. So, abuse, again, toxicity, neglect,
Mhm.
or betrayal. I'll take it from here is personal accountability.
I like that, and I think it helps to, like it helps you to let you know where you're at and where you are, like, trying to go. So it'll not put you in a position of, like, always playing at the feel like you're the weak moment because you don't
Right.
know. When you don't know something, you just feel like, "I don't have." When you just say, "Alright, that was my bad. Let me just figure this out again," it kinda puts you at
Mhm,
an advantage,
mhm.
in your own life. So
Right.
another
Or it's
this
not my thing, but like I said, it's not my fault. I didn't do it because people have struggled with this. Why would I take
yeah,
accountability for something someone else does? Because you want to be in control of what happens next. So it's, I'll take it from here. You messed up. You don't get it. You don't see me. You don't feel me. I'll take it from here.
yeah, and after the accountability, it is the self-forgiveness, and you tapped on that, and I was like, "Uh-oh, I think she in my street," because 'cause I'm like, that's one of the hardest things, I feel like personally, especially when you feel like you failed at something, and it's like, if you don't in a weird way, it's like, if I punish myself, I feel like that is, like, the accountability, that is the like, that's the tap on the knee, like, "You did this wrong, so you have to." There's no self-forgiveness. So in a
Mhm,
world where, like, we live in social media, like, we're under the microscope a lot. So any little thing that we do wrong is like you low key, like, you don't wanna crash out. And so
mhm,
that's what everybody's trying to, like, stop and, like, not do too much, or they're trying to, like, make sure they don't mess up, that we're not even living anymore, we're not even having conversations because we're all so afraid, and then it's just like, when we do mess up, we take it we're so hard on ourselves, and we
right.
see somebody will be like, "Something happened," and like, "I didn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't," because 'cause they're not it's literally because 'cause they're not forgiving themselves, they're punishing themselves, um, and then you came out with, like, a I don't it changed my way of thinking when you talked about capacity. I was just like, "Oh, snap." I never thought about, like, "Oh, I just didn't have the capacity to do that." So can you
Mhm,
expound on that a little bit more? I mean, you have to go in great detail because I know you want people to read the book, but I thought
mhm.
it was really a big aha moment when you think about self-forgiveness and the capacity at which you could perform, or even the knowledge that you had at that moment when you
Mhm.
did whatever it was or said whatever it was.
I love that you really read the book, and I respect that you don't bring people in your community unless you can get behind what was written, and so I appreciate that. Yeah, the chapter is titled Knowing Your Limits,
Mhm,
right? And that's because in my view, and I've worked with everyone from, like I said, survivors of domestic violence
mhm,
to convicted criminal, male population specifically, to children who are at risk in their homes and among their families, to myself, to all types of people, people who
mhm,
are millionaires, people who are broke like I was. I work with everybody. And the
mhm,
truth is, no matter where you are in life, you're always doing the very best that you can. always, even
Mhm.
when it looks like the worst that someone could possibly do, based on their resources, their mentality, their mindset, their emotional well-being, their physical, all of the things, their story, their history, it's still their best. And
Mhm.
so when you look at someone's best, you have to look at their capacity for being at their best. Did they have enough information? Did they
Mhm.
have the resources? And when I say they, now I'm going to talk about you. We could do that for other people. Again, we can have empathy for other people. We could forgive other people and give them many times to get it right. But when it comes to ourselves, we don't do that. And so
Mhm.
in self-forgiveness, the chapter on self-forgiveness is the invitation to look at your ability, to look
Mhm.
at your resources, to look at your health, to look at your emotional state, to look at the people around you. Trust me, you got to look at your environment because that
Mhm.
plays a huge part. And then ask the question, did I do my best? The answer is going to be yes. Even
Mhm.
when you went back to the same person again, were you doing your best? Yes, because I thought that's where love was. I thought
Mhm.
they'd do it again. I thought
Mhm.
I couldn't do any better. I thought this is what love looks like. It's so many I thoughts. And when you
Yeah.
think about it that way, you're doing the best you can. The thing about capacity is that you can always increase it, expand it, and heal it. And
Yeah.
so if I was doing that, what would I know? Let me see what I can know now. Let me see how I can introduce more information, resources, etc. Then take a look at the same situation and see how I'll move. I wrote years ago, look at what you've done with your broken heart. Imagine what you can do when you heal. Look at what
Mhm.
you've done with no resources. Imagine what you can do when you get what you need, the support, the help, the insight, etc. So yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters.
It was one of mine too, because it really did, like, it opened me up. I was dead serious, like, "What? Capacity?" Like, you get so down on yourself. You're like, "I didn't have all the information. I didn't have all like, the whole story. I didn't have, you know, or I had too much of something, too much anger, too much,
Right.
self-loathing." It could be the extreme on the opposite side too, so I really enjoyed that chapter.
Mm,
Um, and the next topic I wanted to move to just a little bit is, like, the resistance to acceptance, because I feel like most people think they accept things, but I like that yeah, most people think, like, it is what it is. That's like 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 a famous line.
mhm,
Um, but it's really not. It's never really is what it is, because we all like we lose sleep over things.
mhm,
We don't see how it pops up. But one of the things that you like likened it to, um, you said when you're ready to start practicing the habit of accepting making peace with your childhood, accepting peace with your child is a good place to start. We don't get to choose our foundation. When you said that, I was like, "Whoa." Um, because so many people have a hard time accepting things that we didn't choose, you know? And it's so hard because we always think about the life that we could have had. And
mhm.
so again, it does give that victim mentality, but it's like it's an entitled victim mentality because I really was a victim. Like this really happened. Like, so how do we come to grips with our past, especially childhood? Because that really dictates a lot. And
Mhm,
honor it, kinda like honor it, grieve it, and then
mhm.
also let it go without feeling like we let the person who harmed us off the hook.
Mhm. That is the hardest part of acceptance because we think if I accept, so I do say it is what it is because in all actuality it is. You can't change a single thing outside of yourself. All you can do is witness things that you can't control, and that's the example I give. You are literally witnessing it happen. You witness the parents you have, how they raised you as an adult. You can look back in hindsight and literally see it happening, and you can't do anything about it. And people think that if I accept it, if I say, okay, like for myself, okay, I was born to teenage parents, raised in the projects, fostered by my grandmom,
Mhm,
exposed to drug abuse, alcoholism, everything. Like I talk about how my dad was a drug addict, but I don't talk about is how three of the men, and I won't name them, in my family were all convicted of manslaughter related, murder related,
mhm,
attempted murder related. So I come from literal G's, right?
mhm.
There's nothing I can do about that. And it was completely unfair. I didn't think I deserved to be dropped off in that family. And I literally told God, like, you tripping. Like, what in the world? Like, I'm not that girl. I don't belong here. I don't relate. Like, it's so much. And we think if we say, okay, it is what it is, then we let those people who exposed us in the worst ways off the hook. We want
Mhm.
them to feel away. I know from personal experience, even when they're punished, it doesn't change your experience. Doesn't make it
Mm.
go away. They can say, I'm sorry. They can go to jail. They can cry. They can feel all types of things, and you will still have to deal with what was done. So
Mm.
acceptance is okay, it is what it is. The past was the past. They did
Mhm.
what they did. And then introduce accountability. What
Mhm.
next? It is
Yeah.
simply releasing yourself from the story, the experience, the narrative, the generational things that happen, and say, okay, it stops with me. It was what it was. And then you get to look at the truth of it. Okay, this is what I didn't like. This is what wasn't good. This is and then decide this is what I'm going to do instead. This is what I'm going to introduce to my family instead. This is what my story will be from this moment on. It isn't letting people off the hook, it's letting yourself be released from the pain that is attached to the story. It is what it is. What next? Right?
Mhm.
It is what can I do? One of my friends who are is a neuropsychologist, she says when we experience resistance, she actually didn't say it like this. When I heard her say something, it made me say, when we resist, we layer our own suffering.
Mhm.
We
Mm.
just make it happen. All when we talk about what our dad did, our mom did, our ex did, our best friend did over and over again, we are literally taking us through that experience over and over again. We are
Mhm.
now injuring ourselves. We are now traumatizing ourselves or re-injuring and re-traumatizing ourselves. So again, if I had to choose how you asked me to choose a song, if I had to choose the most impactful habit in this book is acceptance.
Mhm. I get that. I get that. So one of the things that I pride myself on is minding my own business. And I thought I did until I read your chapter. I was like, oh, maybe not so much. So you said minding your own business is a form of healing. And the difference between empowering and enabling, you touched on that a lot. Um, but I wanted to like kind of hit upon a personality type that often like goes overlooked and is honored, but also can be a detriment to the person who makes being needed their identity. So even though they feel like the world keeps, it's almost like if they told their story, everybody needs me, everybody, I never get to do stuff for myself, blah blah blah. But you've made it your identity at the same time. It's also like you're a participant. So how can those people be set free? Because I feel like the other people, they were more like the family members. It's more prominent. But the person who has an identity and being needed and then kind
Mhm.
of like regurgitating how much they do for people or how overworked they are, how can they get freed?
I have a college roommate who has become my best friend, right? And she reminded me of something that I've said since knowing her in college, which is I give, I give, I give, and I get nothing in return.
Mhm,
And I would say that to her, oh, I give, I give, I give, and I get nothing in return. She was like, when you gonna stop giving? I didn't get it then. It
mhm,
wasn't until years later I was helping someone who I thought I had to help,
mhm,
and it went left. And when I'm
mhm,
talking to them about what happened, they were like, "Well, nobody told you to do it. Nobody's
mhm,
nobody Nobody told you to do that." And I thought about it and I was like, "You're right. You
mhm,
literally didn't tell me or ask me to do this. This is what I did for you. I gave, I gave, and I gave. And now I don't like not getting anything in return. I need some reciprocity, right?" One of the things you touched on, which is enabling versus empowering. And then
mhm,
another thing that you touched on is this idea that we're doing it for others when the truth of the matter is we're doing it for ourselves.
mhm,
Right? There is something in psychology called codependency, and there's an amazing book called Codependent No More that I used in service of the survivors in the domestic violence situations. Because what makes people like that at risk is that usually they come from a childhood where their emotional needs were ignored. So they
mhm,
didn't get what they needed. I didn't get what I needed emotionally, sometimes physically, financially, a whole bunch of things as a
mhm,
child. So a couple of things happen. You get used to not getting. You
mhm,
get used to doing it yourself. Also, when you are in an environment where the people who are ignoring you because they're choosing a man over their children, or they are the victims of, you know, substance abuse disease, because it is a
mhm,
disease. and they're not able to be there for you, then you try to be responsible for how they feel to keep yourself safe. When you're in a domestic violence situation, if I keep him smiling, if I keep him fed, if I keep giving him
Mhm.
sex, if I keep doing these things, then he won't hit me. If I do this, my dad won't hit me. If I do this, my dad won't hit my mom. So we're constantly involving ourselves in other people's lives to keep ourselves safe.
Mhm.
And then we are validated when we do it. Oh, you're always so good to me. You're
Yeah.
the only one who knows how to do it. I can't lean on your sibling, only you. And then
Mhm.
we're like, okay, not only is it meeting my need emotionally, but it's making me feel validated. It's making me feel important. So the invitation in the chapter on minding your business is to release yourself from other people's emotional baggage, other people's emotional well-being, and send them to therapy. And then you go to therapy to work on your history of not being emotionally supported and needing to be validated in that way. There are so many instances where we really just need to mind our business. And I shared today actually, if you're so busy focused on someone else's life, you don't have the energy to focus on your own. I get
Mhm.
parents who are their children are off and married, graduated, and now they're like, what now? What next? What do I
Yeah.
do? They don't even know what to do because they've just been doing everything at their own expense. And so, my hope is that people will learn to mind their own business and create a life that they deserve. And it doesn't mean you don't do for others, you just don't do for others at your expense.
Yeah, I love that because I really was like, let me do some reflection. Um, the next thing after you do your all of that work, the boundaries, and you touched on different boundaries in every facet, but I did want to focus on the family dynamic because I always feel like that's the hardest when you have to create those boundaries amongst people who we share the same blood, and you have those toxic family members, and they could be your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your uncle.
Mhm.
Um, in your family, especially black families, I'm just put it out there. It's always kind of like, well, we family, we gotta stick together, or you have to let things slide, or you have to let them berate you because that's your auntie, and she just go off on the side. So how can we escape that safely?
So I look at boundaries differently than everyone else because for me, boundaries don't keep people out, it
Hmm.
invites people in. The ultimate
Hmm.
boundary for someone who is toxic, someone who is aggressive, someone who is inconsiderate, and I don't care if it's your mom, the
Hmm.
ultimate boundary is distance. I can't do it. And I share a little bit about how I had to give my dad some distance because it
Hmm.
was detrimental to my emotional well-being. I was
Yeah.
injuring myself by letting him in. And so if you want to be connected to people in the healthiest way, again, going back to your needs, you have to identify what makes you feel safe and supported in the relationship. And so I reserve boundaries for relationships I want to preserve. My
Hmm.
boundary for people who are toxic and don't deserve me is distance, no conversation. I'm done. You're blocked. And I know this is difficult for people, but your mom and them deserve a boundary and they know how to follow them. They follow them everywhere else, right?
Hmm.
They park where they're supposed to park or they'll get a ticket. When they're in church, they do what they think church people do. And they make sure they honor them boundaries when they're in the grocery store. They know how to honor boundaries. They just think because you're related, you don't have to have any or you don't deserve to have any. And I beg to differ. And I start my boundary conversations with people with how much I love and appreciate them being in my life. And this is why I want to set the boundary. So it's as simple as what it is, what do you need to feel supported and
Hmm.
safe? Identify that. Then you have to understand that the boundary is yours. When I bring other people in on my boundary and I ask them to do something, it is a request or a suggestion. They
Hmm.
don't have to do it. So I could
Hmm.
say, stop coming over unannounced, and they could still say I was on my way from Publix or ShopRite and just stop by
Hmm.
because that's just how they felt. When I don't answer the door, I'm honoring my boundary.
All right.
And the conversation for me is I like to prepare a meal for people when they come over. I like to have time to sit and chat. I want to make sure I'm giving you attention. I can't do that when you pop up unannounced. Let me
Hmm.
love you by making sure that you tell me when you're coming. I'm gonna make sure I got some lemonade, some chicken. a salad, and I got some time, because
Mm.
otherwise I can't do that. And when I say that to people in that way, especially because they want me to do all those things for them, they see it a little differently.
Yeah, I like that, especially the not answering the door. Don't be mad.
Or
One of
phone.
my yeah, one of my favorite movies as a child. I'm gonna quote it first, and then you'll know it. He goes, "Simba, remember who you are." And
Mm,
I was a kid. I was like, I guess, like he got to, but I didn't realize it until as an adult. And when you said when you have to tell somebody remember who they are, like remember who you are, like
mm,
who you are in this world, and that's like how you kind of wrap this all up.
mm,
Um, it's kind of like telling people remember you who you are, remember whose you are.
mm,
Um, and how is honoring, remembering who we are important to our healing journey? And why
mhm,
is that the first thing that we forget when having like the self-talk and all of that other stuff and paint and creating the narratives?
mhm. If we're not careful, our experiences in life can strip away our identity, our true identity. It
Mhm,
can strip away our purpose. It can strip away our peace. It can strip away our boundaries. It can strip away our self care. Time happens, relationships happen, health issues happen. Things just start to just peel away at who we are. If we don't stick close to who we are, if we don't anchor ourselves in the truth of who we are, when we are met with those things and they try to strip away at us, we'll surrender. So when I was told by the doctor that by the age of 40, I'll be in complete and total kidney failure and I'll be on dialysis, I completely just melted, cried all the way back to the car, sat in the car, said a prayer where God was like, that's not what I showed you. That's not the life that I showed you. You got to remember that I gave you a vision for your life. And if it is contrary to what it is that I said, then it is not a part of your destiny. It's not to say that I won't experience things that happen in my life, like kidney disease. But when it does happen, I don't allow it to define me. So I told the doctor what type of medicine I would be on, what type of regimen I would take. And we, of course, together, he sent my whole file to um, what university? I think it was in New York. I don't forgot right now. But it's like
mhm,
the Center for Renal Disease. And they
mhm,
talked it through and everybody was like, okay, she can do that. And that's
mhm,
what I did. I didn't live like I was this destitute person who was
mhm,
experiencing this thing. And because of that, I was able to beat and get it in remission. If I
mhm,
had forgotten about the vision, if I had forgotten about who I was, if I had just been a kid from the projects and just been a statistic, if I had just been, if I had just seen friendship the way that I had experienced in childhood or young adulthood where I was betrayed, I wouldn't have any friends. I mean, the list goes on and on. You
mhm,
got to remember the truth of who you are. You got to remember the vision that God gave you, because even if you're not a believer in God, God, in my opinion, believes in you. The fact
mhm,
that you have a breath means you have significance. And when you tap into that relationship with God, then it just expands, who it is that you can be. But more importantly, what about your relationship with yourself? Nobody
mhm,
knows you more than you. And so
mhm,
just getting back to who you are will help you make decisions that are in your best interest, like self care, like personal accountability, like boundaries. If we know who we are, those things will be second nature.
I love that. That's gonna help a whole lot of people. Um, so the overall theme of the book is habits, and the more that we notice our patterns and everything else, the more we'll be able to effectively change the outcome and live a better
Mhm.
life. So one, what do you think is the biggest habit that is like the most overlooked but the most overdone, but we don't really get paid any attention? And
Mhm.
then lastly, how do we keep momentum? I think that's one of those things. We
Ooh.
read the books, we do all the things, and we be hyped, and then it's like by the third, fourth week or something happens, it's like the momentum has shifted.
What I will say is this: use the book as a guide and
Mhm,
use the book as something that will help you, like a vantage point that will help you gauge, what direction you want to go in. But the biggest habit or the best habit that you will ever have is to sit and ask yourself, what do I need?
mhm,
If you ask yourself, and what do I need in this moment? So you might be like, I need $1 million, I need $5 million, actually, I need $106 million based on the vision I got. Or you could say, in this moment, what do I need? Well, I need to put the practices in place in order to create the business that will cultivate an experience where I can make that kind of money and have that impact on the community. Okay, what does that look like for you? A schedule. Well, scheduling for me is a part of self care. Boundaries are needed when you have a schedule, right? So, again, starting with your needs and then giving yourself what you need so that you are not at a deficit, that's better than starting in chapter 1 and making your way to chapter 9. Because if you ask yourself what you need, you may need to head over to chapter 7. Right? That's where you may need to start. Or you may need to make an appointment to the doctors, or you may need to make an appointment to a therapist. So rather than pushing a specific habit, I would push your needs. What do you need?
I love that. And so this has been a great conversation. I have a couple rapid fire questions that I'm
Okay.
gonna let you. So the first one is writing in the day or the night,
Bo,
coffee or tea,
I'm gonna go with T.
something sweet or something salty,
Absolutely salty.
Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr.,
Right now, Malcolm X.
salt and pepper, TLC.
Ooh. I was about to say neither. But I'm gonna say salt and pepper.
Insecure girlfriends or girlfriends.
Girlfriends, because I didn't get into Insecure.
Is it Uchi Wally or is it one mic?
One mic.
Okay, and who is Nakeia Homer?
Who is Nakeia Homer? Ah, no one's ever asked me that in this way. What do
Really?
I have to say? What do I have to say? What do I say? Oh, this is what I'm gonna say. Nakeia Homer is a black girl from the projects who decided not to settle.
Oh, I love that. I love that a lot. So that's it. Tell people where they can find your book, where they can keep up with you. This is your moment to just plug anything you have going on.
I've been looking at it. It's sitting right here. I love it. Habits for Healing is available everywhere books are sold. If you want to just put my name in Google, you'll find me and all of the stuff that I do. I'm everywhere on social media at Nakeia Homer. And my membership is called Heal and Grow Daily. And so we work through this type of stuff. The things that are in the book actually are curriculum for next year. We're taking us through this entire book. And you can find everything at NakeiaHomer.com.
Thank you so much, Nakia.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure. This is a
Thank
great book. And I know it's going to help so many people, especially because the New Year's coming and we got elections. It's just going to help us all out.
Thank you so much. And thank you for really reading the book and really seeing me.
Thank you.